Are any of you on the campus? Like, raise your hand if you're on the campus. One. In a dorm room? It looks like a dorm room.
Yeah, this is my dorm room.
You're the rare exception, huh?
I guess so.
If you would all like to put on your camera so we can see you, that would be nice. You don't have to, but it would be nice. Okay, I think it's a couple of minutes after 6, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we'll admit more people as they show up. Kiana, did you have anything you wanted to say before I start?
No, there's no announcements for this week.
Okay. Does everybody know that you're meeting every week from now on?
Yes, we've announced it in a few of our emails.
Okay, good. Good. So that I don't forget it at the end of this, 2 weeks from today, the speaker will be Bethany Berger, Professor Bethany Berger from UConn Law, who has a very interesting specialty in American Indian law. I think she says Native American law. And she has worked with on reservations in the past. I think you'll find her very interesting for a number of reasons, including that particular specialty. For those of you who I have not met, I'm Diane Whitney, the pre-law advisor. I hope to meet you all either in a Zoom meeting, in a Zoom, actually a WebEx interview, or eventually in person. Tonight, I want to give you a brief overview of what's going on with law school admissions. Then a few special messages for seniors, and then particularly information for those of you who are juniors, and sophomores can certainly be thinking about things also. I would enjoy having questions, so if anybody has a question at any time, I don't know, wave your hand, jump around, let me know somehow that you have a question, because I would like to answer all questions. So law school admissions now are a little strange, as you might imagine. I don't know if you have heard, but nationwide, the number of applications is way up, way up. And everybody's trying to figure out why. In the past, there has been something that people were calling the Trump bump. I don't know if that still applies or not, but the statistics are all over the place. And law school admissions are up, depending on the school, all across the country, any place from 20 to 65%. I think what this probably means is that more students are applying to more law schools, and not necessarily that there are really that many more applicants out there. So it's hard to assess just how competitive things are right now. I would have to say that the seniors that I'm hearing from at UConn are getting into some really good law schools with some really good financial aid. I heard yesterday from a senior who has gotten into 4 law schools, 3 of them with full tuition scholarships. And the 4th, it's about a 60% scholarship. So there is some really good news out there. For those of you who are seniors, if you're planning to apply this year and haven't already gotten your application in, please do it now. Don't wait. You're already later than I think is optimal for admissions purposes, but you're not too late. But please get those applications in. Some law schools have tight deadlines. Most do not. Most the deadlines are several months away. But pay real attention to the deadlines at the schools that you're interested in and get those applications in. If you're waiting on something like letters of recommendation, nudge your writers along. Tell them that time is getting tight and could they please get those letters in. If you're waiting to write your personal statement, get going. Do it now. If you'd like me to review your personal statement, email it to me, and I'm happy to do that. And I will turn them around pretty quickly. But let's get going. If you're planning to apply now, apply now. Questions from anybody, particularly seniors? And Kiana reminds you, you can ask a question in the chat box. Although Kiana, as I look down there, I don't, oh, there is a chat box. Okay, good. So any questions from seniors at all?
I have a question. I don't know if you're going to discuss this later, and if you are, it's totally okay. I was just wondering about negotiating scholarships and how you would go about doing that.
I've heard that law schools don't like the word negotiate,
Okay.
but I know what you mean. You're chatting with them, I guess. Yes, it's certainly possible to do that. Do it politely. Do it with care and tact. What I always recommend is instead of saying, "Hey, can you give me more money?" do something like, say something like, "Is there anything I can do to increase my financial aid at your school?" If you're juggling between a couple of schools, and you can honestly say this, say to the law school you're talking to, you, Yale, are my first choice. But my problem is that finances are tight, and I already have been offered a large scholarship at Harvard, and I really would rather go to Yale. So to be honest, you're my first choice. If I had more scholarship aid, I would be going to Yale. Don't say that unless it's true. If you say that to a law school, you have to really mean it. If you give me more money, I will come here. But if that's true, you can certainly do it. Generally, the school that you're negotiating with, the forbidden word, will want to know what other school has given you the money and how much money. And they may ask you to submit proof of what you're talking about. So you want to be scrupulously honest about the whole thing. But it's perfectly possible to do that. Last year, there was a senior who was admitted to a law school A, which was a good school, and he was interested in going there. But then he got into law school B, which was really his first choice. But law school A gave him an incredible amount of money. I used to joke with him and said, if they do anything more, they're going to be giving you a car. They were so generous. But he really wanted to go to B. So he agonized over it a little bit, called up law school B and explained, this is what I've been offered at this other school. I would really rather be going to law school B. And they, a couple of days later, they didn't match the first school, but they gave him enough more money that he is halfway through his first year at law school B. So it does work. It doesn't always work. And some schools are more notoriously stingy than others. Boston College, which is a very good law school, does not like to do this. They will not negotiate with you. But most other schools will. And if you're very polite in the way you make the inquiry, you're not going to piss them off. They're not going to say, okay, forget it, you don't get in after all. They won't do that. They may say no, but that's the only downside of the whole thing. So it's definitely worth trying. Any other questions about things going on now? Okay, then a reminder to juniors.
I have a quick question. Sorry to cut you off.
That's okay.
I'm not a senior. I'm a junior. But is financial aid entirely based on your LSAT score? Because I know typically there's not a lot of factors that weigh into it for the merit-based scholarships that they give. So is it primarily, are they focusing on your LSAT? It's like the only
Yeah.
determinant. Okay.
It's not the only determinant, but the answer is yes. To put it crudely, law schools are buying LSAT scores.
I have a question. If you choose to do early action at a school, and if they give you, would you recommend doing early action? Because if you get like less financial aid from other schools, that would put you at a disadvantage.
It depends on what the early action is like. And they vary all over the board. I mean, some are absolutely binding, so that you've said, you know, if you let me in, I'll go there.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are binding like that usually come with kind of a guarantee of a certain level of financial aid. But you have to read the fine print really, really carefully before you commit yourself to something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else about current admissions? I understand UConn Law's number of applicants is huge this year. To go back to your question about financial aid, though, very, very much based on LSAT score. Almost never based on need. Once in a while, need will creep into the calculus, but generally not. Generally, it's a pretty straightforward LSAT determination. Not to give you any more pressure on your LSAT, but there you are. So now, more specifically to juniors and for sophomores to be thinking about things. Please apply early. Please don't wait until now to apply. I always say, aim for Halloween. You know what has to be done. Get it done, which means time your LSAT accordingly so that you'll have it behind you before you start in the fall of your senior year and you're ready to finish the rest of your application. The LSAT is a little screwy at the moment. I think you probably all know they're giving something called LSAT Flex, which is do it on your own computer with an electronic monitor. But you still have to do it on a certain date that they designate. So you still register for it like you would the traditional test. It's a little bit shorter than the traditional LSAT, but it covers the same material. So you would study for it just as if you were taking the normal LSAT. Frustratingly, at the moment, at least as of yesterday, they have only released test dates up through April. I don't know what's going on with that, and I've heard no rumors. Everybody suspects that they're going to extend LSAT Flex at least through the next several months. So more than likely, if you're a junior, you're going to be taking LSAT Flex, but we don't know that for sure. I'm going to go through some of the steps for the LSAT, which may be repeating things for some of you, but so that I don't miss anything for any of you, let me go through those steps. What do? You sign up with LSAC, Law School Admission Council. If you just Google LSAC, you'll get there. And you can do that anytime. You have to do it sometime because they give the LSAT and all your application materials go through them. Opening an account with them does not cost anything. So at any time, you could go ahead and open that account. And if you're a junior particularly, I would do it now because that way you can keep track of when they open up the other LSAT dates. And those are going to be important for you. Allow yourself 4 months to study for the test, which you can see is why you want to know those dates now, because you want to start studying in February if you're going to take it in the late spring. And late spring is the ideal time to take it. Anytime between like May and July. And usually they have 2 dates between May and July. We don't know what's going to happen this year. My guess is they'll still have 2 dates. So you'll have an efficient date to take it. So as soon as they release the dates and you pick a date when you want to take it, then back up 4 months, and that's when you start studying. Don't ask me how many hours a day you study, because I don't know. That depends on you. What I would suggest is, after you're signed up, well, first of all, they offer a really good preparation course through LSAC, given by Khan Academy, that is free. If you price the commercial courses out there, they're far from free. So free is really good, and the course is really good. A lot of students only use the Khan Academy course for all their studying. So what I'd suggest is open your LSAC account, take and get into the Khan Academy site and take 2 practice exams. Take them cold, but take them mimicking real test conditions as much as you possibly can. So take the whole test in one sitting. Don't take one part and go out for lunch and come back and do another part. Take it as if you're really taking the test. Do 2 of them that way and see what your cold score is. That helps you decide how much studying you're going to do. If you come up with a cold score that's like in the 150s, you have a fair amount of studying to do, but you're not desperate. If it's below that, you're getting a little closer to desperate, and you've got to study a little more. But you will, during the whole study period, you'll be taking practice tests from time to time. So you'll be able to gauge how you're doing. If you're about, I would say, 4 to 6 weeks into the Khan Academy course, and it's not going well, then think about one of the commercial courses that are out there. And there are a bunch of them. They are all online, and they're all good. I mean, all the name brands are good. There are a lot of things you might come across when Joe Schmo, who's a second-year law student at Harvard, is serving as an LSAT tutor. There's really no way to gauge how good that is unless you can talk to somebody who's already studied with that person. So an individual tutor might be a great idea, but it's a little risky unless you can somehow look into how well that person does the job. So you study with Khan Academy, you do as many practice exams as you can possibly do. Getting comfortable with the structure of that exam is really, really important. And particularly getting comfortable with the timing is important. Too many times a student will start the exam, get to the end of the first section, won't have finished, and panics and screws up the rest of the exam. So you want to get really comfortable with the timing so that you don't have that happen. What more about the LSAT?
I just had a quick question. So does the LSAC do they weight your GPA differently than is on your transcript? I was just a little confused on how they weighted that.
They do weight it a little differently, and I don't have a clue how. They
Okay.
have some kind of algorithm that they play around with your GPA, and they come out with a GPA that is a little different from yours.
Okay. Thank you.
It's generally not very different, but it's a little different, and I have no clue how they do that.
Thank you.
To go back to LSAC a minute though, when you're getting ready to complete your application, you have to buy another service through them, the Credential Assembly Service, CAS. And people always ask, well, do I have, it's another cost? Do I have to do that? Yes, you do. Your transcript goes to CAS. Why they structure it that way is anybody's guess. But that's the way they do it, and they have the monopoly. So before you complete your application, you have to buy the CAS service. And when you order your transcript from the registrar at UConn, it goes to CAS. Be careful when you're navigating the whole system about what you buy, because traditionally they offer various bundles and they vary from time to time. So I don't know the structure of the current bundles, but if you're interested in that, make sure you understand what is in a bundle, because some of the bundles will include the cost of the LSAT as well as the cost of the CAS. And unfortunately, sometimes students have bought a bundle like that and then turned around and paid for the LSAT. So they've paid twice. So be really careful. Also, the bundles generally say something like, it includes the CAS service for 6 applications. That doesn't mean you can only apply to 6 schools. It means that if you apply to more schools than that, you're paying a little additional fee for those additional schools. So just be a careful consumer when you make any of these transactions with them. They have a nice service that I'm finding students tend not to see, and that is, I think it's something like Choose a Law School. When you find that site on the LSAC site, it gives you a space to put in your GPA and put in your LSAT score when you have one. And then it directs you to a long, long, long list of most of the law schools in the country with a kind of a bar graph for each one telling you what your chances of getting into that school are. It's certainly not a guarantee, and it's not definitive, but it gives you a good idea of how possible this is or not. So, juniors, or actually now more sophomores and freshmen, what can you do to help prepare for the LSAT in advance? You can take Philosophy 1102, Introduction to Logic. It's not an LSAT prep course. We don't have one of those. But it does a very good job of teaching you skills that are very useful in working your way through the logic part of the LSAT. And those, at least someone like me who was an English major, those are frustrating parts of that exam. So if you can fit Philosophy 1102 into your schedule before you take the exam, it's really very, very helpful. If you're planning to do any time abroad, which I understand will be possible in the not too distant future, think ahead about letters of recommendation. The ideal combination is 2 letters from a professor who has actually taught you in class, and one from outside the university. So if you're thinking of studying abroad, think ahead who you would ask to do your letters of recommendation. So you get that request in advance and you don't run the risk of a last minute crisis of no letters. Also, if you get any hint that a teacher or professor might go on sabbatical, ask them before they leave. What happens with the letters is you get a link from LSAC. When the person says, yes, I will write a letter for you, you get this link from LSAC that you provide to the writer of the letter. And they send the letter directly to LSAC. And it just sits there until you decide what applications you're going to file. And then they transfer the letters to those applications. The LSAT score and the letters of recommendation are good for 5 years. So if you're thinking about a gap year or 2 or 3, I think it's a really good idea to get the LSAT and the letters of recommendation lined up before you graduate. You're in a much better position to study for the LSAT right now than you're going to be when you're out working. I guarantee that. Plus, you don't want to wait, if you're quite sure you want to apply to law school, but in a little while, you don't want to wait so long that you can't find professors who remember you. So if there's going to be a gap of a year or 2 or more, which is a fine idea, see if you can line up the letters of recommendation in advance and just get them in there, sitting there. You might want to wait for the third one, which is, it's a good idea to have the third one from someone not in the university. Maybe a boss that you worked for, somebody you interned with, a supervisor at some point, somebody like that. That one can wait because possibly during your gap time, you're going to come across somebody else who will be a really good person to write that third letter. But for the 2 professor letters, get them in before you graduate. They do not have to be from professors in your major. They don't have to be from professors who teach anything related to law. What they have to be is professors who know you really well, who can really write persuasively about what a perfectly superb law student and lawyer you're likely to be going forward. So pick the people who really know your work the best. That, of course, is a challenge right now because you haven't, most of you anyway, haven't seen a real live professor in a long time. So perhaps for all of you, particularly juniors, really, be giving that a little more thought right now going forward. Hopefully you'll be back on the campus in person in the fall and you can catch up then. But in the meantime, be thinking of who you might ask for that letter so that you have some idea going forward. Another thing for seniors, I guess based on the fact that there are so many applicants this year, take a look at the schools you're applying to and make sure you have at least one that is a really safe school. If you're not sure how safe it is, go to that choose a law school thing with LSAC to check the chances of getting into a school, or make an appointment with me. And it's not too late to add an application. And bottom line, you want to go to law school. So make sure that you have a really safe alternative. I know I can't see all of you, but those of you who I can see, how many of you are seniors? None? No seniors. One senior. Are your applications in? Good. Do you have any answers yet? Good answers or bad answers?
I think good answers all around for us.
Okay, what are you in?
In Yukon, New Hampshire, and Suffolk.
Nice. Nice. Do you have others coming in, or is that it?
Yeah, I'm waiting on Northeastern and Boston University.
Northeastern will probably come fairly soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if BU was a little slow. Just a guess. So there was another senior. There you are. Any news from you? I don't know your name, but oh, Kiana. You have news?
Yes, I got accepted into Rutgers and Quinnipiac.
Nice. Nice. Are you waiting on others too?
I'm waiting on a few others. I'm waiting on UConn, NYU, and Howard.
Boy, isn't Howard having an interesting time now with Kamala Harris in the White House?
Can imagine.
I can't imagine. The whole thing is amazing, and Howard is. I know that they are so proud they can barely stand it. So juniors, we've gone over LSAT stuff. For all of you, I think you know that the elements of an application are the LSAT. Oh, I should tell you, when you get your score, you get the score about 3 weeks after taking the test. I get your score a day or two after you do. So if you're in doubt about taking it again, make an appointment and let's talk about it. If you take the test May, June, July, you don't like your score, one of the nice things about taking it then is you have plenty of time to take it again. Not that you're going to have a wonderful time that summer, because you're still going to be studying, but you'll have time to take it again around September, and your timing is still fine for applying to law school in the fall. You can, of course, take it later, but don't. Take it earlier. Get it behind you. The other pieces of the application, LSAT number 1, personal statement, which is 2 pages, double spaced. Who are you? Why do you want to go to law school? What do you hope to do with a law degree? I'm happy to review those if you'd like me to. Just email them to me. But please, please, please put your name on it. I know that sounds elementary, and of course you're all thinking, well, of course I'll put my name on it. But the other day I got 5 of them with no names. And that gets a little frustrating. So I'm happy to review it, but put your name on it. So LSAT, personal statement, 3 letters of recommendation, your transcript, your resume, and I'm happy to review your resume if you'd like. And what am I missing? Well, the form, you fill out the form online through LSAC. And you can start an application and pause it, so you don't have to finish the whole thing the minute you sit down. For most law schools, the same personal statement will work for all of them. But be careful. Review the application carefully, because sometimes the school will ask you to write about something specific, and then you have to custom make a statement. Sometimes they'll have optional essays. You can write it if you want to. And the question from students always is, how optional is optional? If I don't write one of these, does it show I'm not interested in the school? And I've talked to directors of admission, and they say, no, it's really optional. If there's something more you want to say, or if we suggested a topic that really speaks to you, then write something else. But if you don't, it doesn't matter. You order the transcript, of course, from the registrar. There again, order it in plenty of time because they get lots of requests and it takes a little while to get it. So question, it's now, you're a senior, your applications are all in, you got terrific grades first semester, the semester that just finished. But of course, that's not on your transcript. Can you submit those grades to the schools? Yes, you can. You can order another transcript, brief note, and submit those scores. And I would do that. You know, if it's a perfectly stunning semester, why not let them know that? What else? Addendum. What's an addendum? 3 reasons you might write an addendum. An addendum, as the name implies, something you're adding to your application. You write an addendum if you've had a run-in with the law or discipline. You have to disclose in the application any run-in with the law, any discipline. And they mean any. I mean, they exclude parking tickets. But for most schools, the way they define this is very broad. There again, you have to read the application because they will have a definition of what they're asking for. And sometimes it's not as broad as other times, but for the most part, any run-in with the law, any college discipline. And that means you're a freshman, you had a party in your room, you made too much noise, and your RA wrote it up. Yes. You not only have to reveal it, you have to produce the paperwork if you can get your hands on it, and you have to talk about it. So you write an addendum to explain what the problem is, why you'll never do that again, and why it's not important. An addendum is brief. It's generally half a page. You have to disclose anything, and you have to remember that when you apply to take the bar exam, you have to make the same disclosure. The bar examiners will go back and look at your law school application and compare it to what you're disclosing on the bar application and see if you've disclosed the same stuff. Now, obviously, if you do something in law school, it's not in your application. But if you disclose anything in your law school application that's not on the bar application, they're going to come back and question you, and you don't want that. So you over disclose, you don't under disclose. There's something in the chat.
Yeah, you have a question in the chat box. Someone asks, so senior year first semester grades are not included in typical law school applications?
True. Because if you're following my advice, you've already applied by Halloween. So your first semester senior year grades are not there, but you can catch up and submit them. So back to addendum. Disciplinary run-in with the law is one thing. Second thing is there's something funky in your transcript. Your freshman and sophomore years were just dandy. First semester of your junior year, all of a sudden the grades are rotten. Huge change from what they have been. What happened? And you explain what happened. My parents divorced, my house burned down, everybody in my family died, whatever it was, you explain that. And that threw you off, but then you got back on your feet and the trajectory of your grades was again up. You also would explain any gap in your undergraduate career. You know, if there's a missing year or two, what happened? What did you do during that time? Third thing is if you're a diversity candidate, you write a diversity addendum. Again, it's a paragraph. It's not a book. It's not as long as your personal statement. It's just a paragraph explaining who you are. If you were born in another country, that's worth explaining. Even if you're first generation, your parents were born in another country, came to this country, that's worth explaining. If you therefore speak another language, that's a good thing to include. Sometimes some of this information will probably be in your personal statement. But even if that's true, it's probably worth having it in 2 places. Law schools are looking to have very diverse classes. You can prove that that's something that you can contribute to the law school, you want to do that. So those are the 3 reasons you write addendum. You don't push the envelope. If you're not a diverse student, you don't write a diversity addendum, of course. And on your personal statement, sometimes students think that there needs to be something dramatic. Your interest in the law comes from some dramatic thing that happened in your family. No, you don't need drama at all. The statement does need to be perfect. The grammar needs to be perfect. The spelling needs to be perfect. It needs to be very clear and direct. This is not the place to throw in every big word you know. This is just actually your first attempt at legal writing. So it needs to be very clear, persuasive, but you're not necessarily selling yourself. You're telling about yourself. What else? Is there a question? Oh, can adjusting to online education due to the pandemic be considered a valid reason to use in a transcript-related addendum? Yes, I think it can. If your grades post-COVID look different from your grades pre-COVID because of difficulty adjusting, particularly if you're involved in courses that are notoriously difficult to teach virtually, yes, I would add something like that. I'm wondering if law school applications are going to, in fact, as a rule, include an opportunity to put something like that. But even if they don't, you can still add that in there.
I just had a quick question. So if you were to take a year off after undergrad going into law school, would they want like an addendum kind of like referencing what you did over that time period or no?
No, you would need to do an addendum, but it would be something that would be on your resume, what you did during that time. And it might be something in your personal statement, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And if you're doing that, if you're taking some gap time between undergraduate and law school, don't make yourself crazy looking for a job that's law related. It's not necessary. Any job that you have is going to be considered valuable by a law school. And I mean, really, any job. If you're working in a McDonald's, maybe not the job of your dreams, but you're still proving yourself in a different area of life. So it would be a plus.
I have a question too, sorry to cut you off, sort of similar to hers, but do you sort of advise students to go directly from undergrad to law school? Just because we like already kind of have the momentum of being a student, or does it really matter in your opinion? Because I was thinking about working like maybe for a couple of years post grad.
I think it's very much an individual decision. For some students, going straight through is the right thing. For some, it's not. Very much an individual decision. The danger is, of course, you get involved in some other job and you like it, or inertia sets in and getting back into a school environment doesn't seem so attractive. But it's perfectly fine. I think some of you probably know, I had a little gap between college and law school of 15 years. And I didn't do anything particularly valuable. Well, I did teach English for a while, but for the most part, I was home with very small children and not doing anything particularly valuable. And I don't particularly advise 15 years. And I also don't advise the other thing that I did, which is apply to one law school. However, it all worked quite nicely. So, and I work with graduates also. So if you take a gap year or whatever, I can work with you when you're ready to apply to law school also. And every year I'm working with a number of really interesting graduates. One fellow a couple of years ago, 10 years out of UConn, he'd been a chef for 10 years, but he always had law school in the back of his head. So he got his act together, took the LSAT, applied, and he's already graduated from UConn Law. So it's perfectly possible to take a gap, but it's a very individual decision. It's not something I either recommend or don't recommend. A related question might be, what about getting some kind of graduate degree and then going to law school? Again, very much up to you. I'm working with a student now who's going to get a master's in public policy and then apply to law school. And that, for what she wants to do, that's a very good combination. I think it makes a lot of sense for her. It's a lot of schooling. It wouldn't be right for everybody, but it's right for her. And, you know, would it be well regarded by a law school? Yes, I think it would be. Which is not to say you should all go out and get master's degrees. I'm not saying that at all. But if that's something that interests you, it's very possible. There are also, of course, the possibility of getting a joint law degree with something else, a JD MBA, a JD MPP, a JD Masters of Social Work, something like that. There are a lot of schools that offer that also. Again, a very personal decision, depending on what you want to do after you graduate. Which brings up another thing that I'm often asked. But I don't know what kind of law I want to practice. Fine, you don't have to. The law school is going to tell you what you have to take the first year anyway. You might get to pick one course, but that's all. You're going to take all prerequisites your first year of law school. And you're going to be introduced to a lot of areas of law that you've never thought about. Like, how could you say today that you really want to practice bankruptcy? You don't know the first thing about bankruptcy. But when you take a course in it, you might find out that that's exactly what you want to do. So you don't need to have your mind made up at this point. Now, for some of you, you may have your minds made up already. Some people know already that they want to practice a certain kind of law, and that's perfectly fine. But you absolutely do not have to. You do have to take in law school a broad range of different courses because everything is on the bar exam. Again, the example I use about me is I wouldn't take federal income tax on a bet. I want to stay as far away from tax law as I possibly can. But I took it because it's on the bar exam and it's important. So you will take some things that you have zero interest in, but you'll also take some things that you never thought about, and all of a sudden, they're more interesting than you thought they were. Any other questions?
I have one more too.
Yep.
Just so if you decide to go like right after your undergrad, would you advise to not do part-time? Because I know it usually extends like another year or so. If you're gonna be like a night student. I know a friend of mine who just graduated from UConn Law a couple years ago who was a night student because they were working as well.
I wouldn't advise against it. Not too many law schools have night divisions. UConn does. Brooklyn does. Those are the two that come to my mind right away. No, I wouldn't advise against that. Again, it depends on what you're doing. I actually taught in UConn's evening division for 4 years. I taught juvenile law at night. And the only reason I taught it at night is because I was practicing it all day. And I only had time at night, and they needed somebody to teach it. And it was a fascinating class. It was a class composed largely of school teachers, social workers, and police officers. all of whom were working during the day and going to law school at night, taking all their courses at night. It takes you 4 years instead of 3. But if there's a job that you have during the day that either you really like or you really need the money, I wouldn't advise people against it at all. I think it's fine. You lose a little bit in that you're not going to be active in any of the clubs on the campus, but you're going to get everything you need to pass the bar exam. And you're going to be very efficient. I was always hugely impressed by the students in my class, thinking that, my goodness, they have been working all day and here they are for like 3.5 hours, 4 nights a week. And they get everything done and they pass the bar. So if that fits into your life, absolutely. There are always a fair number of UTC engineers in the evening division and a fair number of insurance company employees in the night division. So it's a good option for a lot of people. UConn is kind of committed to having the evening division because it's so valuable for all those people. It's a small division at night, but it's valuable. Any other questions?
I have a question, but it might just be because I'm getting a little antsy. When you apply around the time frame that you gave, October, November-ish, when would you expect law schools to start getting back to you? Just because some of them that I've applied to have gotten back to me and some of them haven't. And I'm just wondering if this cycle is a little weird because usually I know that people get back to you like January, February-ish, but I also know that there's been a lot more applicants this cycle.
There are a lot more applicants, and it's really impossible to predict when they're going to get back to you.
Yeah.
Obviously, a number of students have heard from a number of law schools. Have you heard from any of them?
Yeah, I've heard from a bit. I've heard from quite a few. So I've heard from like 4 or 5. So yeah.
Is it good news?
Yes, it is good news.
Excellent. Can you tell us which ones are the good news?
So far I've gotten into UConn, Vanderbilt, Berkeley, and then Michigan.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Good school. I won't pry into your personal life, but Michigan is usually generous with financial aid.
Yes, but they haven't sent me it actually, because I got in today. So I'm sure they'll send it to me like later.
Okay. Well, that's a little swift, but good for you. What nice news.
Yes, I'm very happy.
Yeah, they you can't predict that, but they are often very generous. In fact, in the past, it has kind of driven me nuts that 4 students I know of have been offered full rides at Michigan. And they all turned it down. All 4.
Oh no.
And I think this is the reason Michigan is generous, because where did they go? Columbia, NYU, Harvard, and Yale. So to my way of thinking, that's who Michigan is competing with.
Yeah.
So, well, fingers crossed, but what good news so far. But as far as when you'll hear from the others, not a clue.
Okay.
Not a clue. Some are swift, and what is driving students even crazier is you've heard from Michigan, the person sitting next to you might not hear from Michigan for another month.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows why.
Yeah, only because the deadlines to accept admissions offers are like April 14th and 15th, but then some law schools say on their website they won't get back to you until like maybe late April. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it drives you nuts. And unfortunately it might continue to drive you nuts.
Okay.
There's a UConn grad who got into UConn law.
Mm-hmm.
The day before class started. The day before. She's all set to go someplace else. And she pulled it together, and she's a 3rd-year student. But I thought that was cruel, frankly. I thought that was miserable of them, and I'm very fond of UConn law. But there's no telling when. However, if you get to the point where you have a deadline on certain schools and you haven't heard from others, perfectly fair to call the ones you haven't heard from and say, hey, I need to make a decision. When can you let me know?
Mhm.
See if you can push them along. But that's lovely news.
Yes, thank you.
Anything else? So freshmen, I hope you're soaking this all up. I hope you are making a note to take Philosophy 1102 before you take the LSAT. Are there other courses you should consider taking? Yeah, there are. I think constitutional law is a good course for anybody who's thinking about law school. I believe it is taught by both Professor Hettinger and Professor, the other one, whose name escapes me right now. Kimberly Bergendahl, Professor Bergendahl. It may be taught by others too, I don't know. There is also a course taught by Professor Fischel in Canons of American Law, I think is what it's called. Very valuable. When you're thinking about courses related to law that you might want to take, check out the ones that are taught by the professors who have dual appointments at the law school and at UConn. And there are several of them. Professor Fischel is one, Professor Land, Professor Okendo, Professor Wilson are the ones I know off the top, and Professor Kotchenberger off the top of my head. They tend to be a little more substantive and give you a little better peek into what law school might look like. How are you all dealing with your mental health? I wonder if you aren't all going nuts. Based on some of your faces, yeah, you're beginning to go nuts. I can certainly understand that. And, my hat's off to you for hanging in there, getting through this. This has not been the best academic year of your lives, that's for sure. Hopefully it's about over. And those of you going on to law school will actually be going on to law school instead of sitting in that same seat that you're in right now.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
So I'm a sophomore, but I heard you guys talking about like how LSAC weighs GPA differently. I didn't know about that. So like, does it you typically hurt like you bring it down or bring it up, or is it like
It doesn't typically do either one.
okay?
It could do either. And it isn't a big difference. It's a very small difference. And the truth is there isn't anything you can do about it.
Okay.
So
Um,
it's annoying, it's difficult to understand, but it is what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Trying to think of other gems of wisdom to give you. Find ways to keep from going absolutely nuts.
I have a question. If your addendum is like over, not like over a page, but if it's like about a page, is that like still too long? Should you really try to just keep it concise? Because after a certain length, it sounds like excuses, or it should just be in like the personal statement at that point.
Good question. Shorter is better. However, I just approved one that was a page and a half long. So it depends very much on what it is you're talking about. I mean, if things are really complicated and you need that much space, take the space you need. But you bring up a good point. An addendum is explaining something. It's not excusing something. It's not whiny. You're not whining. You're just explaining. And you are explaining as concisely as you can. If you want to email me an addendum, I'm happy to take a look at it, see what I think. And I know I'm giving you inconsistent advice because I'm really saying it should be a paragraph long. But I also have to say it should be as long as it needs to be for you to explain what's going on.
I have another question. If you choose to get a graduate degree, would you recommend, and like let's say you're in like the graduate degree like now, would you not include that in your transcript to the law schools, or would you recommend to,
It's 19 hours.
sorry about that. Would you recommend to wait and then send it in after you have your transcript from your grad school?
I would put the graduate study in your resume and send them whatever kind of a transcript you have from the program. People are getting into really good schools, as you just heard about Michigan.
We have a
and-
quick question here. What is your email to contact you?
Oh, good question. Diane.Whitney@UConn.edu. Diane, D-I-A-N-E, Whitney, W-H-I-T-N-E-Y, @UConn.edu. If you're interested in a virtual meeting with me, go on the Nexus system and make an appointment. And then you get a WebEx link. And the days for appointments are Tuesdays and Thursdays. And right now they're not terribly full. So if you're interested, and they're half-an-hour appointments. Usually they don't take half an hour, but they could. And if you just have a quick question, that's fine. Or if you want to just email me a quick question, that's also fine. If you're not getting the weekly newsletter from the pre-law system, send me an email and I'll get you on the list for that. And remember, you have Law Society again next week. I don't know what the plan is, but Kiara, the counter, will tell you. And the week after that is Professor Bethany Berger.
So next week, Kamya and Rob and I are going to speak on our perspectives on applying to law school and like showing you guys our CAS accounts and how we add recommenders and all that other good stuff to touch a little bit deeper on what Diane talked about today.
Perfect. Perfect. Good to see you all, those of you that I can see. I'm sorry I'm not seeing you in person, but this is better than nothing. So stay in touch, let me know what's going on, and certainly let me know if you have questions. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane.
Yes.
For next week's meeting, is it okay if I send, I forgot your assistant's name. If I send her the link for the Zoom meeting and if she wants to put it in the pre-law newsletter, she can do that?
Sure. Erin Dennehy?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. I hope all is well.
Me
And I
too.
hope to see you in attendance next week.